Let's meet our panelists. She is Professor Emerita at Thomas Jefferson School of Law, former president of the National Lawyers Guild, Deputy Secretary General of the International Association of Democratic Lawyers, and a member of the National Advisory Board of Veterans for Peace, Marjorie Cohn.
Glad to be here.
He is an activist, businessman, and Vermonter, a co-chair of Bernie 2020, and eponymous co-founder of Ben & Jerry's, Ben Cohen.
Yo!
Before we get started, what is both of your involvement in Julian Assange's case?
I have been writing articles, speaking at webinars, helping to establish a state and national committee to support Julian Assange. And I've been doing this for many years, and so that's my involvement.
I really believed in what Julian was doing, and I had an opportunity to visit him when he was stuck in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, and I had a fairly long meeting with him, and what struck me about that meeting was that he was saying that he thought that if he could just expose the illegal things that our country was doing in our name and with our money, that the people would put enough pressure on the government to get them to stop doing it. And he was saddened to see that didn't really happen. And, I believe Julian's a hero, and he let us know what the government is doing in our name, and it was enlightening. It was horrible things that the government was up to, and I feel like I just can't let him, kind of stay in prison. I mean, I think the government is trying to stick him in prison and throw away the key. And so I decided to form a new organization called Assange Defense. And we're working to let the people in the United States know what's going on, know the truth. And that's what I'm doing.
Professor Cohn, can you take us back to the beginning and help just briefly summarize how we got to this place, what the charges are, and what the stakes are of this case?
Yes, well, it's important to start out by remembering that WikiLeaks was formed during George W. Bush's so-called War on Terror, which was used as an excuse to illegally invade Iraq and Afghanistan and prosecute a widespread campaign of torture and abuse, both at Guantanamo and the CIA black sites. And so Julian formed WikiLeaks to try to expose war crimes, and what he is being indicted for, if you strip away all the legal verbiage, is exposing war crimes by the United States, exposing war crimes by U.S. forces and Iraqi forces supported by U.S. forces in Iraq, also war crimes in Afghanistan, and at Guantanamo, the torture and abuse of men and boys. And perhaps most infamous is the collateral murder video, which depicts in 2007 in Baghdad a U.S. Apache helicopter, Army helicopter, firing on civilians, killing at least 18 civilians, including 2 journalists from Reuters, injuring 2 children. And then, if that wasn't bad enough, and chuckling about it, you can hear them chuckling, it's really grotesque. And then firing on the people that were rescuing the wounded, and then driving a U.S. Army Jeep over one of the dead bodies, cutting it in half. And that constitutes 3 separate war crimes under the Geneva Conventions. And so what Julian is being indicted for is allegedly conspiring with Chelsea Manning, who was an Army intelligence officer at the time, and to take and release classified information, which WikiLeaks then published, as did the New York Times, the Guardian, Der Spiegel, Le Monde, many other newspapers and media outlets. And that's why during the Obama administration, and Obama, of course, prosecuted more whistleblowers than everyone else before him combined, but refrained from prosecuting Julian Assange because they were worried about what they called the New York Times problem. And that was, if they indicted WikiLeaks and Julian Assange, they would also have to go after the New York Times and other outlets that published what WikiLeaks had released.
In 2018, Assange was indicted under seal by the U.S. Department of Justice under Trump while he was in asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. In 2019, Ecuador revoked his asylum and Assange was arrested by the UK. He is currently being held in custody by the British government as he awaits a decision on his extradition to the U.S., where he could face 170 years in prison for 17 charges under the Espionage Act. Professor Cote, could you explain how the Espionage Act is being applied here?
It is a completely improper use of the Espionage Act. He has not committed espionage or treason or any other high crime that the Espionage Act was designed for. And by the way, the Espionage Act was also charged against Daniel Ellsberg, who is one of the most famous whistleblowers, who gave the Pentagon Papers to the New York Times and helped end the Vietnam War. And so Julian is being charged under the Espionage Act, but under a treaty between the U.S. and the U.K., and he is now in prison in London awaiting the decision on extradition. But the extradition treaty forbids extradition, and Trump is trying to extradite Julian from the UK to the US, forbids extradition for political offenses. And there's nothing more political than revealing war crimes. And espionage is classically one of the things that is a political offense, and he is charged with under the Espionage Act.
The Espionage Act, this is a piece of legislation that's over 100 years old. And when exactly did the Espionage Act start applying to whistleblowers, people like Ellsberg, people like Chelsea Manning? When did this executive interpretation of it start to shift?
It's my understanding that the use of the Espionage Act against Daniel Ellsberg was the first time that it was used against whistleblowers. And it was actually used during the Obama administration as well against whistleblowers. But as I said, Obama refrained from charging Julian Assange because he would really be charged for practicing journalism. And that's why the Trump administration added a charge of computer hacking. They're trying to paint him as a hacker, so because of all of the blowback from charging him as a journalist. And by the way, the reason that Trump went after him when Obama, who went after a lot of whistleblowers, refrained from going after Assange, was because as Obama was leaving office, he commuted Chelsea Manning's 35-year sentence to the 7 years she had already served, and Trump was furious about that. And Trump also did not like the fact that Assange was revealing U.S. secrets, although Trump reveals them all the time himself. And so that's the reason that Jeff Sessions and Pompeo made all these accusations against Assange and then filed this indictment. They're trying to get him extradited to the United States.
I see some national security reporters celebrate the charges against Assange. What should every journalist be concerned with if, let's say, the government's charges, if they were sustained in a court and Assange were convicted, what that precedent would set?
Well, it would set a it would chill journalists from reporting based on classified information, which they are entitled to do, which the big newspapers and media outlets do all the time. And it would chill journalism. It would chill journalists from reporting on national security matters, from receiving classified documents and reporting on them. It would be a dagger straight through the heart of the First Amendment freedom of the press.
Why is it then that there isn't more of a public outrage among the kinds of liberal free speech defenders that you would normally see? The battle lines here seem to be not what you would expect in this kind of scenario. What are the kind of political reasons behind that?
Well, that's a very good question. There has been almost a media blackout on Julian's case, which is really, so far, the trial of the century. He had a 3-week extradition hearing and got almost no coverage in the corporate media. The alternate media certainly did cover it. But I think that some liberals are upset that WikiLeaks published some emails of Hillary Clinton before the 2016 election. But in fact, WikiLeaks did not initially received those emails. It was a Freedom of Information Act request by a civil organization, and WikiLeaks didn't do anything other than what other outlets did. But for some reason, he has gotten a bad rap. And there were also some trumped up not charges, but an investigation by the Swedish government at, I think, the behest of the U.S. government of sexual assault charges against Julian Assange, which have since been dismissed. They weren't charges. Again, the investigation has been ended, and the accusers have recanted, and yet that was used to tar Julian Assange in the corporate media. And when you see the coverage of Julian's extradition hearing and his case in the corporate media, they just cover gossipy things. They don't really cover what he's charged with, which is revealing war crimes, and the fact that, according to the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, he was subjected and shows signs of prolonged psychological torture. He spent 7 years in asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy, and during that time had some very serious health issues, but the UK government would not allow him to leave the embassy to go to a hospital and get medical care without arresting him. And so now he has some very, very serious health issues, which make him susceptible to the COVID virus, and also he has become a suicide risk. And if he was extradited to the United States, he would and there was testimony about this at his extradition hearing, he would in all likelihood be sent to a supermax prison where he would be placed in solitary confinement, just as Chelsea Manning was. And that constitutes torture. And so he is really in very frail psychological and physical health and should not be locked up by any means, and certainly shouldn't be indicted for revealing war crimes.
Because of the 2016 leaks from the Hillary Clinton campaign and the DNC and lately the Hunter Biden leaks, I see some liberals take a very expansive view that hacked material should not only not be reported on by the corporate media, they should be censored. The distribution of it should be censored on social media.
You know, the logical extension of that view is to chill the rights of journalists, actually, who are surrogates. The media is a surrogate for the public. It's not that they're doing it for themselves, but given our technological age, there are going to be hacks, and there are going to be journalists that are going to use information from those hacks to get the truth out to the American public and indeed to people around the world. And so by placing limitations, and I would say artificial limitations, on what journalists can and cannot print, that also is going to have a chilling effect on the First Amendment freedom of the press, and particularly deny the American people around the world, information and the truth, which is what we're trying to get at.
The Obama DOJ concluded that it could not indict Assange for practicing journalism. If Assange was so good for Trump, then why did the Trump DOJ conclude otherwise?
I don't begin to understand how Trump's mind works. I don't know that anybody knows how it
Sure,
works.
of course.
But when he saw and everything Obama did, Trump is trying to undo and has been pretty successful at that. But when Trump learned that Obama had pardoned or given a clemency to Chelsea Manning as he left office and sentenced her to time served. She served 7 years in prison for revealing war crimes also.
Some of that in solitary.
Right, in solitary confinement, stripped naked for inspection. She was subject to torture as well, and the UN Special Rapporteur did confirm that. But when Trump saw Chelsea Manning, her sentence being shortened, that infuriated him, and that started the ball rolling to go after Julian Assange. That's my understanding.
Ben, Professor Cohn made reference to the kind of physical and psychological pressures Julian Assange is under. Can you speak to what your impressions were when you met with him, and maybe go into a little bit more of what he's experienced?
When I met with him, he was quite lucid, and he was, very reasonable, rational, and understood what was going on. He was just, I think, disheartened that that revealing what the government has been trying to hide, revealing government illegal acts, so far as to be killing innocent people, that it didn't have much of an effect. I mean, it's the usual. It seemed like it was the usual news blip that, wow, this was the biggest news, and look at our American servicemen killing human beings as if it were a video game.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he felt like that there was hope, that if WikiLeaks could reveal the truth of what was going on, that we would put a stop to it. And we haven't. I think he was also feeling the same thing about the releases regarding what the NSA was doing in terms of compiling information on all Americans, I believe.
Did you get the feeling that he felt any sense of regret or conflict about, how it was all panning out?
No, I didn't get the sense that he felt any regret or conflict.
Professor Cohn, can you explain to our audience what the course of Assange's extradition hearings has been?
There was 3 weeks of testimony from experts and journalists and all kinds of witnesses, very powerful testimony about the collateral murder video, the things that the war crimes that he revealed. And one of the interesting things that came out at the extradition hearing was, in the indictment, the Trump administration is accusing WikiLeaks and Julian Assange of endangering informants, U.S. informants in Iraq and Afghanistan, by publishing their names. And in fact, the testimony that came out at the extradition hearing from several witnesses was that Julian Assange rigorously insisted on redacting the names to protect people, and when some of the media outlets wanted to be more lax about it, he insisted on protecting their identities. And in fact, one of the things that we don't hear about is that the revelations by WikiLeaks in the Iraq war logs actually saved lives, because when the Iraqi government saw evidence of torture by U.S. forces and the support of U.S. forces in some of the Iraqi detention centers, they refused Obama's request to give U.S. civilian and military personnel immunity from civil and criminal liability for anything that they might do while they were in Iraq. And that forced Obama to withdraw our troops from Iraq, most of the troops from Iraq. So the revelations by WikiLeaks did not endanger the informants because of Julian's insistence on redacting out their names. And in fact, the revelations about the Iraq war crimes actually saved lives.
Professor, two questions. One, should Assange win his extradition hearing and not be extradited to the United States, then what would happen to him? Would he just be in the UK? Would he just stay there? And the second question is, in your honest appraisal, do you think he will prevail in those hearings?
The judge who has sustained extradition claims and agreed and extradited people from the UK in 96% of the cases is going to make a decision by early January. And in all likelihood, she actually said at one point, there's a high chance he'll be extradited, kind of prejudging the case.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Right. So if she does make a decision that he should be extradited, that's not the end of it. There will be several levels of appeal within the UK and even an appeal to the European Court of Human Rights. Now, if extradition is ultimately denied, then Julian cannot come to the United States, will not be sent to the United States to answer for charges in the indictment, and will be set free because he is being held on a bail jumping charge in custody, which is awfully long time to be held in custody for a bail jumping charge. And presumably, if extradition is denied ultimately, he would be free. Now, if he came to the United States, he could be arrested and indicted because they would have jurisdiction over him. But if not, he would be free.
Do you believe this has been a fair process so far, his extradition hearings?
That's a good question. The defense, Julian's lawyers have put on a tremendous case and tremendous testimony by witnesses. The government has put on some evidence, but not nearly as powerful as the evidence by the defense. And the fact that the judge would not allow Julian release on bond, given his very frail health and the danger that he would contract the coronavirus in custody, and he would be in grave danger because of his pre-existing conditions due to the lack of medical care that the UK government allowed him when he was in the Ecuadorian embassy. That has really endangered his health. So to that extent, I would say, no, it was not a fair hearing. But I think that some very, very powerful evidence was presented by the defense at that hearing.
I've also read that there are some kind of procedural obstacles that he's faced. Access to his attorney, being put in a glass kind of cage in the back of the courtroom at some distance from his counsel, so he isn't able to inform him about, points that could be raised in the course of the testimony. That if he has to kind of project out loud and everyone can hear any comments that he wants to make to counsel. Have any objections been raised to those concerns? And is the public at all sympathetic, in the UK at least, to those kinds of imbalances, procedural imbalances?
Yes, I'm glad you raised that, Brianna, because his lawyers have made objections at every step. And in fact, they were denied communication with him for a long time, which prevented them from preparing his defense. And when your client is separated from you, you're not able to confer, and that interferes with the attorney-client relationship. And it certainly did have that effect. And when Julian does say something out loud, because his attorneys are not sitting right next to him, then the judge admonishes him. So it's kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't. But yes, that has certainly interfered with his right to a fair extradition hearing.
And can you help us understand the hacking claims a little bit? Because it's difficult for me to understand. As I understand it, Chelsea Manning offered up the information. This isn't a case where anyone's alleging that Julian Assange broke into anybody's computer systems. So what are the charges being alleged there?
Well, they're trying to paint him as a hacker to get around the allegation, the attacks on journalism, and so they are accusing him of conspiring with Chelsea Manning to break into a government computer to steal government documents in violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. But Patrick Eller, who is a forensic expert, testified at the extradition hearing that the attempted cracking of the password hash was not technologically possible in 2010 when the conversation between Julian and Chelsea occurred. And even if it was feasible, the purpose would not have been to conceal Chelsea's identity, and it would not have given her any increased access to government databases. And so that testimony really undercuts that charge and the attempt of the Trump government to paint him as just a common hacker, as opposed to a journalist who is doing his job under the freedom of the press.
So let's talk domestically. What are the prospects for relief for Julian Assange in the final weeks of the Trump administration? Is a pardon in the works?
I see Trump pardoning a lot of people, including himself, although he can't pardon himself for state prosecutions, only for federal prosecutions under the Constitution. I think he'll probably pardon his family and people close to him and everybody he can think of. But I doubt that Julian Assange will be on that list. As I said, from what I can tell, Trump holds a grudge. He is still upset with Obama for existing, for being his predecessor, and probably for being a much more successful president in many respects than Trump. But I can't imagine that Trump would back off of Julian Assange's prosecution. I don't see it. I think there will be a lot of pardons. Can he pardon himself? Who knows? The Supreme Court may ultimately decide that issue. He can't pardon himself for state offenses. He'll pardon people close to him. I doubt that he will pardon Julian.
What do you make of efforts like by folks like Glenn Greenwald, who's gone on Fox News and tried to do the thing where he reverse psychologizes Trump? There's this belief that he watches Fox News and he'll do what people say, and he actually follows people's advice. And he went on recently to say, it would be very good if Trump, he would totally own the left if Trump, pardoned Julian Assange. Do you think there's any likelihood that those kinds of efforts might be successful?
Well, using reverse psychology on someone who is as erratic as Trump, I'm not sure it works. And again, I'm not a psychologist. But my understanding is that Trump is on a tear against Fox News ever since they called Arizona for Joe Biden. He wants to start a media company to rival Fox News. And that's, I think, what he intended before he was elected president in 2016. Didn't think he would be elected. And we'll see how that pans out. He wants a forum to continue to inflame his supporters, and he has a lot of them. And he's not going away. He's not going to go quietly, and we will be stuck with him, I'm afraid, for the foreseeable future. But I doubt that he's going to. He does not like Fox News, and particularly because there are some people on Fox News that have said that Joe Biden won the election, and that infuriates Trump because he's convinced that it was stolen from him with trumped up charges.
Well, maybe Glenn has to go on One American News Network then to sell this thing. I agree that the prospects are dim for a pardon by Trump, though I will also say I was surprised by Obama's commutation of Chelsea Manning. So, these things can happen. What about the prospects for the Biden Department of Justice dropping these charges?
That's a good question. Biden has made some disparaging comments about Assange, but on the other hand, he was part of the Obama administration that made the decision not to indict Julian Assange, specifically because of the New York Times problem. And perhaps, and I think it is up to us as progressives, now that Biden has been elected, once he takes office, to push him in a progressive direction. And part of that, I think, would be to to push him to pardon or at least drop the indictment against Julian Assange. Whether or not we'll be successful, assuming that Julian Assange is extradited to the United States, remains to be seen. But our work is just beginning with the election of Joe Biden, because he is going to be pushed. Progressives really put him over the top, and he needs to really be pushed, because a lot of the instincts that he has and things left over from the Obama administration would be much more moderate and centrist.
A number of prominent Democrats, such as Neera Tanden, Senator Mark Warner, openly celebrated the charges against Assange, and it was, after all, Obama's DOJ that put Chelsea Manning and these other whistleblowers in prison using this expansive view of the Espionage Act. What can activists do to attempt to push Biden and his DOJ to be more sympathetic to leakers and journalists?
Well, first of all, it's up to us, you, me, Ben, people in the alternative media, in various mediums, to educate people about what is really happening. And again, there's been almost a complete blackout in the corporate media about Julian's cases, but we're talking more broadly about whistleblowers. And I think the more education we can provide people, the more tools it will give them to organize and make that one of their important demands of the Biden administration. And it's going to take pressure. I don't think that Biden is going to do the right thing just based on his instincts as a kind, empathetic man, which he is compared to Trump. I guess pretty much everybody is compared to
Everyone
Trump.
is, yeah.
Yes.
Could you please tell us a little bit about the book, Ben?
Sure. It's the book We Are Millions. It's being published by OR Books. All proceeds benefit the Courage Foundation, which has been leading the charge to defend Julian. And it began as an online project. And We Are Millions means that there are literally millions of Assange supporters. And so for this particular project, each person held up a sign talking about why they support Assange, and took a photo, and there was gobs and gobs of photos because gobs and gobs of people support him. There were also I think Dan Ellsberg is there, and MIA and Pamela Anderson. There's quite a few well-known people. Yours truly, I'm there.
Well, are there any? Who are the more high-profile political supporters in the United States of Assange? Are there many?
I don't know. I'm I don't have any off the tip of my tongue. Marjorie, do you know any?
I am.
Well, if there are, we don't hear about them, unfortunately.
Yeah. I know Jeremy Corbyn has been supportive. Am I right? And Yanis Varoufakis, a handful of other kind of international folks. But I'm kind of struggling to bring to mind local high-profile political supporters, people who are office holders or aspiring office holders.
Bernie Sanders supported him.
Really?
I inquired when I, was a co-chair of the campaign, and I, signed on to something in support, and I wanted to make sure it was okay with Bernie. And he's come out publicly in support of him. And, I don't have any other politicians, but of course, Oliver Stone, Alice Walker, Chris Hedges, who, a lot of people who should be running the country.
Noam Chomsky as well.
Yep.
We're familiar with him.
And in fact, Noam Chomsky, Dan Ellsberg, and Alice Walker are co-chairs of Assange Defense, of the committee that Ben helped form.
And it looks like both Bernie Elizabeth and Tulsi Gabbard have all made statements opposing Assange's indictment. And Senator Ron Wyden, a quick Google reveals. So, in terms of pressuring the left or raising the public profile, it might be of interest to continue to encourage those politicians, among others, to speak out more strongly than they've done so already.
Yeah, I mean, it's a clear case of kill the messenger. And, and I think that there's a difference between whistleblowers and publishers. And WikiLeaks is a publisher. I mean, I support whistleblowers as well, but there was no law broken. A publisher publishes. And, I mean, you got these other online publishers like Twitter and Facebook publishing outrageous, lies. And apparently there's no problem with that. I don't think that you can have freedom of the press and say that, well, it only applies to places that are or used to be print media, publications like the New York Times. I mean, I believe that certainly if the New York Times had printed this information, there'd be no problem. It's just because somehow or other, the internet is so new and WikiLeaks is internet based, and they feel like they don't have to treat an internet publisher like a, shall we say, a legacy publisher.
First thing for WikiLeaks, and we said nothing.
And that distinction is completely arbitrary. That only journalism is only if you're a $1 billion corporation, then you can call yourself a journalist.
Yeah, and to me, I mean, there's journalism. I mean, I always thought journalists were reporters, and then there's publishers, which is, I mean, journalists are reporting the news, publishers are publishing the news, and I don't know. It's hard to believe that it's illegal to publish information if we honestly mean that we have a free press.
Obviously, we want to see more Democrats champion Assange's case on basic First Amendment grounds. We want to see the squad speak out and things like that. My final question to both of you is, starting with Ben, what should be the message to Democrats who are mad at WikiLeaks, who think Assange cost Hillary the 2016 election, we're still sore about that, to convince them that this prosecution is fundamentally wrong and they should oppose it?
Well, first of all, my understanding is that it was kind of buried, but just recently there was the unredacted Mueller report came out where he said that he could not find any proof that that Assange did anything to release documents that were harmful to Hillary.
Yes.
I think people need to hear that, but they also need to hear, I think the bigger issue was that Julian did us a favor by revealing what our government is doing in our name and with our money. And if we don't know, if we don't find out what our government is doing in our name and with our money, there's no way that we can hold our government in check, which is, I believe, the function of citizens in a democracy. So, I mean, if you don't have freedom of the press, there's no way for the citizens to know what the heck the government is doing that they don't want people to find out about. and there's no way to hold them accountable. I mean, it begins the path to what? Some sort of totalitarian or authoritarian government, but it's certainly not a democratic government. I mean, it gets to be more and more democratic in name only. I mean, you put that together with the idea that we have a system of legal bribery which finances our elections, that shoots that part of democracy to hell. And then we say that there's freedom of the press, but if the press wants to publish something that the government doesn't want you to know about, there is no freedom of the press. And I mean, we either gotta stand up for it or say we're gonna roll over and let them go and do whatever illegal acts they want to do.
I agree with everything that Ben said, and I think that it's really important to make front and center the issue of what Julian Assange and WikiLeaks published, and that was evidence of U.S. war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan and Guantanamo and black sites. And there is a tendency of people, liberals, people on the left, to say, Trump is so bad that Bush wasn't that bad. And we forget, I think, that Bush is responsible for starting two illegal wars and responsible for the deaths of upward of 1 million people in Iraq, Afghanistan, and U.S. service members as well. And by revealing the evidence of U.S. war crimes, WikiLeaks and Julian Assange actually did us a great favor in revealing that information. And that has to be part and parcel of pushing Joe Biden to, first of all, not swell the defense budget. It's really not a defense budget, it's a war budget, a military budget, and also pressure him not to invade a number of countries, which Obama was dropping bombs from drones in 7 different countries, and he had a massive program of surveillance, and we forget that as well. So I think that by really focusing on the guts of what Julian Assange revealed and WikiLeaks revealed, which is war crimes, and linking that to these illegal wars and U.S. imperialism and American exceptionalism all over the world, and pushing Biden away from that and pressuring him, because he's not going to do it automatically when he's talking about putting Susan Rice in his cabinet, and Samantha Power, etc. He is going to continue that policy. And so I think that those two things go hand in glove, and it's up to us as progressives, as the left, to make that clear, and it's up to us, the alternative media, to give people the tools and the information they need to organize to that end.
Well, thank you so much both for joining us. That is incredibly edifying. You are both very clear communicators, and you've really, really helped us to, I think, connect this issue, make this issue connect for a lot more people, especially when the attention is so divided right now. We've still got the Georgia runoff elections that will be kind of coinciding with the results, in the UK, and this will help refocus people's attention, I think, in an important way.
And to echo those sentiments, Bush was worse than Trump. And where I started to break from the Obama administration was when he not only ratified the domestic spying under Bush, but expanded it, and expanded the war on terror under a different name. I hope that in the Biden administration, liberals find their values and they stand up for human rights. If you consider yourself anti-war, anti-torture, pro-free speech, and pro-free press, you should be appalled by the Trump administration's persecution of Julian Assange. Ben Cohen, Professor Marjorie Cohn, thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure and an honor to appear with Ben.
An honor to be with you, Marjorie. I'm sorry we weren't in person. We could have all had an ice cream party together.
Bernie's my favorite flavor. Always will be.
I
I
will
still
come
haven't
up.
tried it.
I swear to you, I will come up to Vermont with Bree when this is all over if you'll have us.
All right. I'll definitely have you.
All right,
I'll be there,
pencil
too.
us in.
right.
I love it.
Thanks a
Looking
lot.
forward to it. Thank you both. This was really,
Thanks.
truly great.
All right.